Hello, everyone. This is the phone conference and General Congressional Assembly meeting of a community of people that are moving together to, under the label that I have chosen, and everybody seems comfortable with it so far, of the Supreme Court of Law for the United States of America. This is a bold proposition, but we can talk about it later. Anyway, this is the 2nd of October, the 2nd of January 2021, the first conference of ours of the year here. And we like to follow an agenda, and the opening portion of the agenda is a prayer. And if there's no objections, I'd like to go ahead and open in that manner. True God, Yahweh Jehovah, champion of truth and justice in the universe, please send your angels with your Holy Spirit to touch each and every one of the participants here, to take a hand in their lives, protect us all, one and all, from forces of evil. And help us, please, to be inspired to choose our words carefully and respectfully so that we might build consensus and harmony about how to advance your holy, righteous cause of truth and justice and peace on this earth. For if we're arguing and getting frustrated with each other, peace automatically escapes. So please help us to keep calm and respectful and thoughtful and righteous in all of our manners in which we speak and talk, and attempt to build working relationships with each other. And please guide and direct us and inspire us for solutions to the numerous evils that are facing us on this earth, and help us to develop consensus about what you wish for us to do in response to those evils, because we know you like to work through your devoted followers, your people who have functionality of conscience and empathy on this earth. And in hereunder, and in following the example of your precious Son, Jesus Yeshua, 2,000 years ago, in his grand name, we pray these things. Amen. And hereunder, I've rearranged our conference agenda a little bit. I shortened it. It needs even more shortening. But agenda item 2, is there any new items that anyone wants to add to next week's agenda that we haven't got fit into this week's agenda? Is there anyone with an agenda item for next week's agenda that they'd like to place on the conference invitation here? Hearing none. And I think I see that we've got Michael, or at least Cindy, in the conference. Oh, Michael's here too. Excellent. As I placed Michael's agenda items right near the top of our conference. Michael had 2 items, the first of which concerns the maybe I should let Michael introduce it. I kind of reworded the exact wording of his proposition there, added more details, and Mr. McNally, Mr. Nally, is also, Michael's building on Mr. Nally's document, so maybe Michael can pass the baton to Paul, and I think we can take more than 5 minutes on this. Michael, would you care to introduce this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I just wanted to ask how many on the call listening were able to catch Paul Nally on the live streaming broadcast? There were several TV channels that had him. Did anybody see it?
This is David in Michigan. I did. I saw it, and I copied Paul Nally in an email I sent to Charles saying congratulations for the exposure. I yield.
All right. Yeah, he was on several streaming news channels. OAN, I believe, is the one that's probably the most popular, and then NTV, Right Side Broadcasting. But it was really good. And the proposal, I would like to, I guess, let Paul, if he's on right now, just say anything about it, what he would like, and then I could present my proposal after he gives his words on the issue. Paul, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Basically, what we have done, 44 citizens from around the country have petitioned the grand jury for the Northern District of Georgia to take control and manage a criminal inquiry into the allegations of misconduct in this presidential election cycle. This is a nonpartisan effort. What we are seeking is that if the evidence does show, and we believe, contrary to the opinion of the former United States Attorney Barr, we believe that there is sufficient evidence to warrant not just the inquiry, criminal inquiry around the nation, but the issuance of presentments and indictments of persons or persons, corporate and natural persons, for violations of federal laws concerning the election process. And we hope to see them indicted to trial and, upon conviction, being sentenced to a term of years away from the social intercourse of peace-loving, freedom-loving American citizens. So that is it in a nutshell. Now, the primary reason for bringing this action is because we have experienced time and again multiple instances of violations of federal criminal statutes, and we have not seen criminal prosecutions that have followed. So we want to put an end to our reliance upon the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI in bringing these people before the bar of justice. We will assume our duty as prosecutors in this matter. So with that oversight, I will yield to questions or comments.
Just Chris has an observation. If I might, I think it would be logical and clear as day to presume that there was more than one state experiencing it nearly the same simultaneously moment and time, although throughout different time zones, where a devious plot was executed to stop the counts where they had the Dominion and other machines and systems in play to dramatically alter the vote numbers for the Biden group and to the detriment of the Trump group. Not that I'm for either group or not, although I am certainly anti-criminal elements, as we see clearly evidenced by the Biden group. It certainly seems reasonable that someone was calling the shots. There was a defined playbook that was disseminated through some sort of intercommunications means between the different state factions who all participated simultaneously. And, of course, it was blatant in Georgia, and they had video cameras to document it, and a fake burst pipe to cover it up. These are all things that we want to pay attention to, and certainly support that we need to have someone that is actually interested in preserving the rule of law and justice in America, objective justice that is, as opposed to being conflicted and biased as the private foreign corporation called the Department of Justice and the FBI seem to be completely compromised and perhaps beyond the ability to make a fair and neutral adjudication of what crimes are because of conflicts of interest. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Michael, did you have further focus about taking Paul's model complaint and trying to encourage others in our group here to do similar actions? I think that was part of your wording in your proposition here.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for us to use this this criminal act, as a way to trigger people to get involved. I believe that it would be very advantageous for us to take Paul's his claim and reword it to fit our particular state, in his demand for the investigation of a grand jury. We could apply that to whatever state we want, and that's what we're planning to do in the state of Florida, is to pursue a grand jury inquiry to investigate this crime that has disenfranchised all of the states. Every state would have the right to do this and clearly have proper standing. There's no doubt about it. And I think this would be a great way for us to, find other people in the community that feel the same way, that would be willing to put their name on the petition. Petition the federal court in their district, whatever state that may be. We're in the middle district of Florida, but we have three court districts, federal court districts, and we're trying to find people that would want to participate in each of those three districts. And so far, it's been a pretty positive response from the people I've spoken to. And then the second proposal that I made was to start nominating people in our group here on this phone that would be capable of taking on different duties and aspects of organizing our efforts. And by nominating someone, that gives it a better standing, a little better honor, rather than appointing yourself. And I think
yes,
it's very appropriate in following that pattern. It was a pattern that the founders chose as well. So I would yield at this time to any comments, questions on these two proposals.
Okay. Anybody? Comments, questions on these two proposals? Well, I could share a little bit. On the first one, I am inclined to believe that the Biden campaign has orchestrated fraud, but I would want to also side with Lewis in this issue, in that we need to have specifics. I haven't had the time to get into Paul's complaint and its details. I don't know how much specifics Paul goes into there, but we would need to have evidence solid that is worthy of establishing probable cause to form the belief that the crime has actually been committed. And a key point there is specific individuals need to be named. Maybe we could get at least a brief response from Paul there. Paul, in your complaint and motion before the grand jury, did you name specific individuals that you believe are guilty of criminal behavior, or did you leave that kind of ambiguous?
No, we did not. And thank you, Charles, for allowing a little further input. We do not name specific individuals. And the reason we don't is because there is no need in taking up that amount of paperwork to request a grand jury investigation. Now, it might be helpful to know that as I recall, 3 of the petitioners on our complaint are in fact witnesses to conduct which they allege was illegal in that voting process. The rest of us are asking the grand jury to conduct its own investigation, which a grand jury has absolute jurisdiction to do. Now, let me also point out that our petition is requesting the Atlanta Division Grand Jury to investigate, to manage, supervise, and investigate allegations from all 50 states. Now that, of course, is a very large order. But what a federal grand jury can do, now, first off, you have to understand that a grand jury anywhere, a federal grand jury anywhere, from Guam to Puerto Rico, can investigate violations of federal criminal statutes wherever they occur. Now, there are other procedures to follow if they start an investigation in a crime committed in the state of Washington, let's say. Then whatever they determine in Atlanta, they can either advise a federal grand jury in Washington of what they have found, or they can just go ahead and issue an indictment. But that indictment must be transferred to the district court, having in personam jurisdiction of the offender.
Yeah.
Now, because this is such a tall order, another thing that the grand jury can do in Atlanta is they can communicate directly with other grand juries around the country. So if they find that there was a problem in Michigan, they can contact a grand jury, federal grand jury in Michigan, and ask them to focus their attention on what's going on in Michigan. And when they are through with that investigation in Michigan, let the Atlanta grand jury know what they found. And they can do that for all 50 states. If there are citizens in, for example, Arizona, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, who are actually witnesses and use our petition as a boilerplate for filing their own, then they can petition Pennsylvania, a federal grand jury in Pennsylvania, to conduct an investigation in that state and ask the grand jury in Pennsylvania, when they have reached a decision, to forward a copy of their presentment or indictments, well, a copy of a presentment to the Atlanta grand jury, so they will know that that state's taken care of. So if any citizens want to participate in a criminal prosecution of those who have stolen the value of our property, our intangible property, which is our vote, then they are welcome to do so either by joining a petition in their own state, or they can send a letter of support to the Atlanta grand jury supporting our request for the Atlanta grand jury to manage and supervise that criminal investigation. And I'll yield if there are any questions or comments.
This is David in Michigan. I'd like to respond to Paul. Charles is quite aware that, and maybe Lewis is too, but I think to a lesser extent, that I have a case that I have been having to deal with that is taking a long time to kind of come to the surface here on this forum with this assembly. And what I'm doing instead is I'm having to take it to a federal court. And William Barr is one of those that I have evidence against. I am specifically naming names. And I, after hearing your video and seeing your video of the last few days, I was wanting to make contact with you. My situation is not specifically dealing with the election, but my specific situation is dealing with the same actors that are dominating the corruption here in the state of Michigan and at the higher levels going into D.C., and to include William Barr. And I have requested, I've just been working on the paperwork here. I have requested a grand jury, special grand jury under 18 U.S.C. section 3332, I believe it is, or 3331. I think it's 3332. And that, I want access. I am disabled. Anyway, I was wondering if I was to send you a copy of all this paperwork, if that would help in any way to deal with the state of Michigan. I yield.
Okay, first off, yes, you're correct in 3332. I assume that you have made that request to a federal prosecutor in your appropriate jurisdiction. If you have, you should realize that the federal prosecutor, upon your written request, does not have any discretion. He must inform the grand jury of your criminal complaint. Now,
I am aware of that quite extensively over the last 12 years or so of my reporting other crimes to the U.S. Attorney's Office and reciting even back in 2012 18 U.S.C. 3332 and seeing the abuse of discretion by Barbara McQuaid. And so and I've seen several others before that. So this is a pattern and practice of the office itself, which is the reason why I've taken this to the Washington, D.C. level, to the Department of Justice, and it's only layered further and further of the same old stuff. Like I said, it's a pattern and practice. I yield.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Have you sent a letter of complaint or a petition of complaint directly to a grand jury foreman?
Here in Michigan, at the state level, they have undermined the grand jury process with the investigative subpoena statute. So there's only two types of grand juries here in Michigan. One is a one-man grand jury, which consists of a judge, believe it or not, and the other is a multi-county grand jury that is convened by the at the state level. And so the short answer to that is no. At the federal level, I have been in the courts. I have been in the federal courts as a plaintiff, so to speak, and in the face of the U.S. Attorney General and FBI and DOJ and all that stuff demanding access. And I have gotten from the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals as well as the state level of Michigan Court of Appeals that citizens have, number one, no interest whatsoever, no legal interest in the prosecution or non-prosecution of another, and they have, number two, no right to access the grand jury. And
okay. May I interrupt? First off, any court that uses that phrase, bear with me a moment. Any judge who uses that phrase, that a citizen lacks a judicially cognizable interest in the prosecution or non-prosecution of another, and puts it in writing and signs his signature, has committed a federal felony under 18 U.S.C. 242. That comment has been possibly the most abused precedent, alleged precedent, ever by the courts in this nation and in my state. I don't know about your state, but in my state, it's an abuse. The reason for that is, number one, that comment came out of the case of Linda R.S. versus Richard D., which was a case that arose in Texas. And the question to which that comment applied was, does a citizen have a right to compel a state's prosecutor to criminally prosecute an individual? Every one of us can agree that no, a citizen cannot compel a prosecutor. And the reason they can't is because of a doctrine called prosecutorial discretion. So it is possible to assume that a prosecutor in any given case might find greater social value in exchanging information for a criminal prosecution with an informant. I mean, that just makes common sense. So consequently, that is the reason why that you cannot compel a district attorney to criminally prosecute a case.
Well, if I may, getting more directly to what you said earlier about violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242, 1041, whatever, is that that is the reason why I took my criminal allegations against the judge, as you just hinted about, to the U.S. Department of Justice and to the Supreme Court in presenting that type of bad behavior to the Supreme Court, and Again, deaf ears, dead ends, malfeasance, additional criminal activity, proof of domestic terrorism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, insurrection, whatever you want to call it, it's the same result. And so it still boils down to my question. My initial question here is, because I have been answering your questions, would my submission to your grand jury for the purposes of, that a sideline, basically, what you're saying, your focus is on the election 2020 and not on, it appears, anything else, but there is one little thread of evidence, two of them, one being the state of Michigan and the other being William Barr, who's no longer in office, that I have evidence against specifically. So
yes.
I will again ask the question, would this submission be of any assistance to you, or if we were to use this forum of Charles's weekly conference here as a forum, I can put it on to next week's agenda. I yield.
Actually, what you can do is look at our petition to the Atlanta grand jury, and you will see the words where we ask them to inquire into violations against this presidential election cycle, and then you will see the phrase, and other criminal matters. So here's what you can do. You can use that petition as a template and draw up your own complaint of other criminal matters, and you can list them if you want to. And then you can mail that directly to the United States grand jury clerk in a sealed envelope and address that envelope. Well, actually, what I'm going to ask you to do is this. Take your petition, put it in an envelope, manila envelope, seal it, address it on the front to the foreman, the United States District Court Grand Jury, Atlanta Division. Put that manila envelope in a little larger envelope and address it to the United States District Court, Northern District of Georgia, Atlanta Division, C/O, in care of clerk of the grand jury. I think her room number, if I recall correctly, is number 600.
Is that the grand jury that you are with?
Yeah, that's the one we have mailed ours to, yes, and that is the procedure we have used. And what we did is on the outside of each envelope, we put a warning sticker. Opening this mail by any other than the addressee is a violation of federal statutes. Now, the reason we put that on there is for the following reason. Number one, the clerk of the grand jury is not the same office as the clerk of the U.S. District Court. There's two separate offices. The clerk of the grand jury in Atlanta, and I'm sure it's that way in your state as well, is a employee of the U.S. Department of Justice or an employee of the Assistant United States Attorney's Office. Now that way, number one, you're keeping a United States attorney, hopefully keeping them from opening the mail and looking to see what it's about. Now, the reason for that is because there's case law on this that goes back to the 1790s in the case of Henry Quarles and Butler, And there it is specifically stated that your communications with any official concerning violations of criminal laws are privileged communications. In other words, what they're saying is no other officer, be it federal judge, be it United States attorney, be it United States marshal, nobody has any business knowing what your specific business is with a grand jury. And let me say that again just in case somebody wants to make a note. It's Henry Quarles and Butler. So, because our petition carries a broader statement, i.e. other criminal complaints, then yours would be jurisdictionally proper before the Atlanta grand jury. Now, what might happen to yours is when they realize all of this is happening in Michigan, they may transfer your complaint directly to a federal grand jury in Michigan. Now, do you understand? Do you need any clarification on jurisdiction and procedure?
No, I think because I have a tendency, we've got the recording. I took note of the timing here, and I can go back because I have no fingers and no legs. I don't take notes as fast as you talk, and so I'll go back to the recording when it's done. And clearly there's no assistance there. There's no digital transmission that I can just present this right straight out of my computer. I have to find ways to get to the post office, or first I need to get to some place to buy envelopes, and the subject matter of my stuff that I'm dealing with right now, it deals with an illegal eviction during a federal moratorium on evictions, and so I've been targeted for a long time, and I don't seem to get any assistance and accommodations and things like that. So I understand the whole process, the whole procedure, and I understand the tediousness that I have to go through in order to do that, because nobody's there to receive my digital transmission with the one click of the button that says the word SEND, send. And I do thank you for all the information on everything that is difficult for me to do. Thank you, sir.
I understand, and I'm sorry to hear of your situation, but yes, you do. You need to understand you have an absolute right to go directly to a federal grand jury, and any judge or the United States attorney that says you do not have a judicially cognizable interest is violating the 18 U.S.C. 242. Now, that is also, I would ask you to add that complaint against any judge or any United States attorney who has said that, or better yet, who has written it to you in your case. They need to be looked at by a grand jury, federal grand jury. They need to be federally prosecuted, and they need to spend time in a United States facility. Now, keep in mind that when we go to the federal grand jury, I also have similar complaints about the misuse of that phrase from the case of Linda R.S. And that's another thing that you need to know if you don't already, and that is that grand juries have the absolute right to judge the law, whether it's statutory or case law. That is their discretion. I'll yield.
Thank you, Paul. I believe, and David, good interaction. I'm glad that to hear you and Paul discussing the fine points. I would like to put a wrap on the first issue that Michael has raised here, and perhaps, hopefully, we won't consume another 40 minutes of in discussing the second issue. But Michael has also raised the second issue here about nominations of individuals in our community instead of just claiming it ourselves. Nominations of individuals in our local communities that I think Michael focused at the county level here, for assuming offices with some degree of colorable authority. Michael's using words there that don't appear to me to be traditional with the common law, but they have basic merit in just their obvious implications. Michael, would you care to jump in and re-summarize, help us focus on issue number 2 here?
Yeah, sure I would. Thank you. Yeah, the verbiage isn't rooted in any kind of common law, mainly because of the technology difference that we have. You know, for example, Intel Scout. You know, we have the internet now that we all can be scouting and finding intelligence. Some are better at it than others. Some are not so good. Others are better at just being general stewards of the land, air, and water, and government. So, you know, these positions of steward, Intel Scout, investigator, legal, aid, which is something that Paul Nally would fall under, and yourself as well, Charles, which, I nominated you a couple weeks ago to be, our legal aid, our legal expert in this effort. So we need to start considering, officially nominating people to do these different jobs that need to be done. We have a team. We're building I don't know, some could call it a force, some could call it a team, an army. However you want to put it together, we need certain people to fulfill the various duties. And by nominating them, you lend merit and credibility to the act. Whereas if it were done by self-appointment, it's not the same. It clearly, implicates. So this is how the founders did it. As they began their effort pre-Revolutionary War, they nominated different ones to do different things, and that's what we need to do. We need to get busy about this effort, and I think we really need to start pondering, how we can get this ball rolling. And this is a good start. This is a good way to start. And I like Paul Nally's effort, and I think we could grow it state by state. The evidence, it was mentioned earlier, if we're going to be bringing forth any evidence, there are volumes and volumes of evidence that are being gathered by highly credible professionals, citizens. The list goes on and on and on. That is, a no-brainer there. We could simply point to these sources of evidence that need to be investigated. The cry throughout the land is loud and clear that there is something fishy that occurred on election night. And the results so quickly changed in 6 states in a matter of hours in a very parallel fashion, which in itself is highly suspicious. not to mention the fact that he won both Florida and Ohio, which have long been deemed bellwether states. And for the victor, the alleged victor, Biden, to not have carried those is very odd and strange and suspicious and demands accountability, along with the volumes of evidence that has been reported by many, many people in many states. So I'll yield at that, and I hope that we can, start getting some traction here and start nominating different ones to take different positions. A county steward would be a very general, well-rounded position that almost any one of us could fulfill. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Charles. I yield.
Thank you, Michael. Comments, questions from anybody? I do have
Lewis
some
of
personal
Michigan here.
Lewis, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just respond to both of the conversations that have just taken place regarding the position of county steward. Something like that, whether it's county steward, community, what's the Republic's got something that they came up with, community, I don't know, growth, or I don't recall the title right now. But I think that is something that's actually handled at if a county assembly wants to put something like that in place. I do see the need. I can definitely see the need, and I think I comprehend, the action that Michael is expecting that, that position to be involved with. I don't think that is up to this body to determine. You could suggest and put it out there. We are very comfortable here on Wayne County with what we have, the model that we've adopted by Charles, and what's in place. And we would feel comfortable establishing, any other positions that we believe that would assist our community in growth. And I think that's what I believe that's what Michael was talking about. So that was regarding the second issue. Again, I don't think that is the role of this body here. I think this is the court. And I think that this is, just as Charles has named it, if we are going to use this as the Supreme Court of Law for the de jure, then we should keep that role. Not that the Supreme Court of Law can't, for example, hire an investigator for a particular matter. I certainly believe that those things can be done. I don't think that that's necessarily an office, but one that comes forward for a particular case. Regarding the first matter of each of the states kind of adopting Paul and their group their petition, I think we had discussed that, and I'm glad that Paul reiterated that on this call, that he and I actually had some discussion about this federal grand jury and looking into coming into Michigan and other areas, and he cleared up that that's what the federal grand jury could do. And as such, I think that it's not necessary for each state to bring forth a similar action. I think what he's suggested, sign on to what Georgia has done, and if you're looking for that federal grand jury to look into your state's activity included in that letter of support, state that. In terms of election fraud, I'm still waiting to see evidence here on Michigan. I haven't seen one shred of evidence, not one. And I'm following these court cases that they have filed, and I believe that there's 1 win and 59 losses. So as I mentioned a couple of calls back, I support what they're doing in Georgia in terms of the investigation.
Oh, he's got me muted.
You're not muted.
Okay, I said point of order. You're supposed to stop and address the point of order.
I heard you say 1 point of order just then, and then I heard he's got me muted, and I did stop. That's how I heard your second statement. You've got the floor.
Okay. The fact is, in those cases that you claim to cite, not one bit of evidence was heard by a judge. Not one bit of evidence has ever been heard by any judge in any of the cases. I yield.
Okay. I did watch the Michigan Senate hearings, though I didn't watch Pennsylvania's, I didn't watch Florida's or anyone else's, but I did take about 4 hours to watch Michigan's. And what I heard was nothing but allegations, no evidence. So I'm waiting for anyone to bring forward any evidence, because only thing that I'm seeing here is a repeat of the actions that happened 100 years ago or more during the Reconstruction period. They're actually using the same type of language. Radical Republicans with their Reconstruction, which prior to, 1964 was the most inclusive period of time in this country. So they're using the same, and I'm seeing the same, Georgia was the last state then to be admitted into the Union after readmitted to the Union after Reconstruction, because they had removed all of their black representation in the state the year before. So they were kicked out. They were actually readmitted, kicked out again, and then came back in. And to me, this is a repeat of all of those actions. I'm looking at this, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm looking at this all over what's going on in this country, and I'm like, this is the same thing that happened in 1869. We're going through the same things that they were doing in 1870. Matter of fact, 1865, prior to that. The black codes and those type of things that brought on the first Civil Rights Act. I'm hearing the same language. It's disheartening. But we'll play it out. And I'm going to follow this through, looking for any evidence. I yield.
Thank you.
If I may.
Louis, are you saying that, if I might, are you saying that you have not seen any affidavits presented yet? Affidavits should be considered as evidence, I do believe.
Yeah, I have. However, I've also heard those people speak on those affidavits at the Michigan Senate hearing, on a few affidavits that I was able to read. Yeah. And believe me, if I was sitting on a jury, I'd bring them up for perjury. Okay, well, I'd bring them up. They're historic, and see, that's the problem, Charles. When one brings forward an affidavit, we are to accept that as fact. But the people here, when it comes to a matter of ethnicity and racism, with these targeted lawsuits in places like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Wayne County, of course, targeting Detroit here, and others that have some heavily populated black and brown populations. I don't use the word minority, and that heavily Democratic population is a code word. It's nothing but a dog whistle. So let's call it what it is. What I am seeing, and it is my observation, that anytime large numbers of black and brown people are voting, the other side, the Republican side, sees that as fraudulent. And they are surprised that, number one, 66% of the population turned out to vote. That was even higher than Barack. That was surprising, number one, for them. And the fact that so many people actually despise that human being, Mr. Trump. That is a shock to some people. And us on the other side are looking like, are you kidding? He's one of the most despicable human beings I've ever had to witness in my life. But that's an opinion. That's simply an opinion. I think that we are wasting our time with that. And when I look to deal with the de facto, I'm looking at the administration and the policies and how will we interact with them. Certainly not to look to keep one or the other in office. Although this one here, my belief, and obviously I am not in the majority here on this call, was actually dangerous to the union. And I think that the day that he got elected, I put a post up on my Facebook, which I wanted to go back and reshare, and was removed. And I said, he's going to preside over the divided states of America. I said that on election night. And I went back because that's what I see right now. And I wanted to repost it, and Facebook had removed the post. But that's where we are. This is certainly, when you've got an action from one state to telling another state, or not telling another state, starting an investigation because of the actions in this state. They didn't do it right over there, or they didn't do it right over there. And it doesn't matter what name we put there on the state. We're dealing with, and we are existing with the divided states of America. I no longer even use the term United States. I simply, like they do across the seas, call us the states, because there's no united here. So with that, I yield.
Thank you, Louis. If I might try to summarize just briefly here, I don't mean to belabor the point, but I think technically speaking, you have, in your most recent comments here, you've admitted that there are affidavits, and I do believe affidavits are evidence. So I think your previous choice of words was in error in saying that you haven't seen any evidence. It's just that you don't think the evidence is credible. Am I presuming too much there?
No, you're right. I do not think the evidence is credible based upon the testimony of the witnesses and the authors of those affidavits.
Okay, well,
I straight think they're lying.
Right,
and if you lie in the affidavit, I think they need to be brought up on charges.
Well, that would be in a counter complaint. Dana
Nessel, the Attorney General here, has indicated that she will be investigating those that are bringing up these frivolous lawsuits and claims. So they better have some evidence, because I think that's far time.
The smoke and mirrors get so thick in the de factos. I don't like to get distracted with what prosecuting attorneys are indicating that they might do. But I do know the mechanics of due process of law, and if we've got evidence, and I'm glad that you're admitting that technically speaking, even though you don't think it's credible, there is evidence in support of these claims, and at that point, a court, any court, can assume jurisdiction. Justice delayed is justice denied, and any court of general jurisdiction can assume authority over that. All county courts and all precinct courts are courts of general jurisdiction in the USA, and if the proper local geographical county or precinct is not exercising their jurisdiction to hear the merits of the evidence and the counter complaints, then any other court can do it. And so I
had no problem with that.
Well, I
remember
dare suggest.
Hold on, Charles, if I may. Remember,
sure.
A couple of weeks back when Paul introduced his to us his suit, I said I support that, and we were looking for any evidence that they find. And remember, that's when we had the discussion, and he because I wasn't aware that they can reach over here to another state. So we had that conversation. Well, this is a federal grand jury. Okay. So they can take a look at any state. I said, I look forward to any evidence coming out of that grand jury investigation, because an affidavit, see, unfortunately, Charles, with the history of this country, from me, being a man of color, black man, a white man or any Anglo-American, as you say, an Anglo-American, male or female, especially the female, coming up and making a statement and saying something as factual without any other evidence other than her affidavit, that doesn't sit well with me. You know, Emmett Till was a 14-year-old young boy killed because of a white woman saying, you know, he touched me on the elevator. You've got men that are sitting in jail. You've got a men of color.
Point of order.
Wait. I need to be able to finish
I have been waiting. I have been waiting, and I did ask for, if I may, before you just did a couple of minutes ago, and kept on going. So
Charles asked me a question, though, David. Charles asked me a question, and we were continuing the conversation. I then responded to him. In fact, I interjected and asked him if I could while he was still speaking. So we were having a dialogue here. I didn't hear you at any point in time ask for the floor.
Well, that's too bad because you were too busy talking. I think Charles heard me, and I think he wanted to go ahead and make his point on something, and he engaged you in something that was much longer. And I'm just asking for a point of order to say that I just heard you say "if I may," and I've already said "if I may" before you did. That's a point of order.
Charles, your call.
David, I did not hear your first point of order. I didn't hear that. Maybe you were on mute or something.
No, I didn't say point of order. I said "if I may."
Okay, well, either way, I didn't hear you ask for the floor, whatever verbiage you said until.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sure Lewis is near the end of his point here. If we can allow Lewis to finish here, and then you can jump in, please, David.
And I will, just with one statement, the history of this country makes it such as an Anglo-American coming forward with an affidavit. I understand what you're saying regarding the due process of law. I need a little bit more than that. There are too many of my people that have been that are dead because of that, in jail because of that. There was a time in this country where, again, one had to have any man of color had to have an Anglo-American even vouch. We couldn't sit on a jury. We couldn't testify. If I said it's 3 o'clock, no one believed it. I need you to come by and attest to that fact. So because they've in this climate here on Michigan, in this land, Michigan is one of the most segregated states in the country, believe it or not. It really, just because it's north means absolutely nothing. It's the Mississippi of the North. So as such, bringing a white woman, which is what remember, that was Rudy Giuliani's star witness, up here to testify to what she saw take place downtown Detroit was not factual. And with affidavits coming from people like that, it undermines any type of confidence in the judicial system. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Lewis. And I have some thoughts on that. I think we can build on that. You're raising some excellent points, Lewis. But David, please express your concerns.
Well, it appears to me that Lewis is omitting or discarding something that's happened more immediate in Michigan's history with regard to this 2020 election that is just a very brief moment back behind us, and he would rather have us listen to and take as fact all these things that he's talking about based in the 1870s and other periods of time that he was not even alive, much less, I just think that it's a totally unfair comparison for him to be using his statements as argumentative facts that, for instance, another one even talking about focusing too much, in my opinion, on a white woman who had an affidavit. I also saw the same 4-hour hearing that he apparently was looking at, and I saw an Indian woman that came up first, who you could barely understand her language, but I understood it well enough to know that she wasn't a white woman, speaking perfectly good English. And then there was a couple of more. There was a man and a woman. I think the man had a Hispanic last name, and the woman had she also was from India. These people are immigrants to the country. They were anything but white. And they also had affidavits, and they were making their testimonies too that were concurrent with the so-called white woman that he wants to tie in with the Reconstruction Acts and all this other kind of stuff that's totally unrelated. Except in his mind, and he'll admit that, that that I'm just not going to buy as fact what his opinion is, and I yield.
Thank you, David.
And if I may respond to that, you can buy whatever you want. The woman, the Indian woman that testified in Michigan, was probably the most racist of the group. That's the woman that said, you can't even understand my name, you can't even say my name, and let's say some chow comes up and wants to vote without ID. And that word chow, she was referencing a Chinese person. She put on display the prejudice from Indians to Chinese and Chinese to Indians. So I focused on the one that I thought was on some type of drugs or intoxicated. I actually, at the time, I was typing into the chat, is this woman drunk? And that was the white woman who had a lot of other issues, who I thought was blatantly lying. I wish they had to, if she had taken an oath, I think she'd been in jail for perjury. So yeah, they've got a bunch of racists. And they are racist. Like I said, Michigan is the Mississippi of the North. And we had people here that were surprised about that. But because I wrestled in high school and was involved in judo and, did AAU and had to travel throughout this state, I was the one always telling people, listen, you leave the tri-state area, you have a problem. This is farm country. And you get in mid-Michigan, you have a problem. So there are, and that's been proven, David. That's been proven. There have been all type of racial incidents here. So nothing, and by the way, Reconstruction, you need to go back and take a look and study your history. That period of time is very relevant to what's going on right now. Very relevant, specifically with regards to human rights. I yield.
May I?
Cindy?
I yield.
Yes, this is Cindy in Florida, and this subject matter has gone too far. I don't believe for 1 second that there is any racism on this call, that any of us that are on this call have any prejudices towards any people, no matter what their skin color, and I would really like to change the subject. I yield.
Thank you, Cindy. Louis, I do think that we've made the basic points here, and that it probably would be good to go ahead and try to move on to other issues on our agenda. Do you have any objection there, Louis?
No objection on my part.
Okay. I would like to entertain the notion, in light of your gracious admission that technically speaking, yeah, there is evidence upon which a court of general jurisdiction could assume authority to adjudicate this matter, that maybe for our next agenda that we put on an agenda item to review whether or not there is probable cause to form the belief that crimes have been committed as a result of the evidence that's before our court. I would like to point out the technicality of due process, that with regard to any specific act, one act, there needs to be at least two witnesses. Lewis's point about one person that's he questions the credibility of submitting an affidavit, we would need two affidavits addressing the same issue in order to establish probable cause to form the belief that a crime has been committed, unless there's some type of other evidence in support, like a dead body or something. So I think I'll go ahead and put on next week's agenda revisiting the actual merits of the accusation that there's been criminal fraud in this case, and then maybe we can get into the technical point of whether or not we got two affidavits testifying to the same point. With all the testimony that we've heard so far, I would think that would be simple for the people that are supporting Mr. Nally's general proposition here to come up with. and at that point, we could proceed to ask if there's any people that are willing to submit affidavits, like the clerks in charge of the recording booths or something like that, willing to submit affidavits calling the first affiants liars or anything, and maybe they can produce secret videos or whatever. It could unfold, and I think it would be good for us to go ahead. This is obviously an issue with deep roots in our discussion here. It's very timely, and so I'll go ahead and put that on the agenda for next week to take some time to examine the evidence in support of the general complaint that Mr. Nally and others in our conference here are inclined to believe is already been submitted in publicly available testimony and things.
I have a question.
Sure, Louis.
Okay, on this call next week, are these people who are making these allegations to bring evidence and provide evidence on that call for our review?
Yeah, if Paul and Michael or others want to, Chris, anybody that has specific affidavits, especially if they overlap on the specific issue of instance of voter fraud by particular individuals. Paul said he wasn't naming any individuals. We would need specific individuals. There has to be physical action by named natural people in any type of a criminal complaint. That's an essential element of a criminal prosecution. Under common law definition of crime, you got to have a natural person you accuse. You can't just accuse a legal fiction corporation or something. And so, I believe we could move forward in that manner, Louis.
Okay. The reason that I asked that question is that, without it, it's a waste of time. So, yeah. I mean, it gets into, again, a long discussion and opinions and everything else. So,
yeah. We want to avoid that, just like Cynthia here is appropriately pointing out to us that it can go back and forth forever unless we get down to the nuts and bolts of due process and whether or not we got natural, real people, both as complaining parties and injured parties and accused criminals. So we'll put that on next week's agenda then, and unless there's an objection from anybody. Does anybody have an objection? Hearing none. I would like to go on from here to Michael's second point, to do a little bit more follow-up on the county officers. I personally would like a delegation of authority from the group for me to assume the office of Justice of the Peace for Precinct 1 of Coleman County, Texas. I don't know too many people around here, and I'm thinking of going down to the county clerk's office and filing a document saying I'm making myself available. I'm claiming the office of Justice of the Peace for Precinct 1 that is presently vacant, and just putting that in the county record. And that's one of the most powerful offices in the county, technically speaking. And but from there under, if it's just me doing it, it's kind of thin. But if I've got a delegation of authority from a few of you saying that you're familiar with me and you do believe I'm competent to follow due process of law to administer justice for the local people of Precinct 1 of Coleman County, Texas, that would probably double my influence in the county clerk's office when I go in there to file my paperwork. And so I harmonious with Michael's second point there, I would like to do that. And I do think also town constables would be extremely important for doing these intel scouts, investigations, and things like that. A real lot of good ideas there and instinct, but I think trying to embrace our common law terminology, where our real constitutional horsepower is at, is a much more empowering manner of proceeding with this general proposition. I should yield there. Comments, questions, especially from Michael. Anybody? I yield. Anybody muted? Hearing none. How's our time holding? I'm sure we've got at least a little bit. Yeah, we got a little bit of time. We've had a good, healthy discussion so far here.
Excuse me, Paul. I'm sorry, Charles. One moment, Paul. Did you unmute yourself? Were you attempting to?
Yeah.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. I do have a question for Charles. Now, first off, let me say I am in favor of his proposition. However, I understand from several years ago, having been in the state of Texas for several months, that there is an elective constitutional office of Justice of the Peace. So my question is the current office of Justice of the Peace vacant in that county? I'll pause.
Sure, Paul. Thank you for focusing more tightly on these important issues. In Texas here, in Coleman County here, they've got what they call county-wide Justice of the Peace. Okay? Yes. But a neighboring county, Brown County, has Justice of the Peace officers for each of their precincts. Both of our counties have 4 precincts, and in Brown County, they've got a bigger population, and they've got a Justice of the Peace for each of those 4 precincts. But over here in Coleman County, we've got quite a bit less population, maybe 20% or so, and we've only got 1 county-wide Justice of the Peace. But probably the larger issue is that what you're referring to there is similar as the way they regulate county judges and county sheriffs. When they prescribe election process and duties for county sheriffs and county judges and justices of the peace and things like that, they're reaching beyond the technicalities of their constitutional mandate. And what they're doing is they're granting a municipal franchise that is in fundamental conflict with the common law grassroots system. Does that make sense to you, Paul?
Well, yes. But what concerns me is, would your common law stature that you would be claiming be in a legal conflict with a statutory office which apparently already exists?
I do believe the short answer there is yes, but they're under the conflict by applying true law to the conflict. Their municipal franchise is inferior to the grassroots common law self-governing organic process that I would be invoking. And to my mind, I'm quite comfortable raising that precise issue in front of these local de factos, because I've been in there crossing swords with them before in a CPS case. They turn tail and run every time I come in there. I just need a good issue and some support from people like here that got some type of vote of confidence, showing that there are people that recognize that I know what I'm talking about, at least better than the de factos, at least equal to the de factos. And so I'm prepared for that battle. You're raising good issues, but and I frequently criticize a lot of good people here. I don't mean to be too harsh, but I need to be assuming a point on this, because I'm talking about doing bold things all the time, but I'm not doing them myself yet. And if I'm actually doing the kind of bold things that I'm talking about, then maybe that'll kind of help inspire some of the others to to do things similar in their own local jurisdictions. That's what I'm hoping. So, that's a wrap there. Paul, do you have any further comments or questions, or should we move on?
Oh, move on. I'm through. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Any other comments or questions on this issue that Michael raised? Thank you, Michael, for raising it. Any comments or questions from anybody else here?
Just Chris would like to particularly note that I was taken with the knowledge that both Mr. Nally and Mr. Scheid displayed into some of these higher knowledge and the access to some of the special grand jury aspects, and particularly the clerk of the grand jury and other things, that I would be dearly pleased if you, Charles, could share my communication, and I might be able to communicate with him further on a private matter, not taking away from the call. But I thank you very, very much for having them share their knowledge with us.
Charles,
thank you.
If I may, Charles, you can share my contact information with anyone.
All right. Thank you, Paul. David, are you in the same boat there?
Maybe I misspoke. Like we could share my information with them, and they could then choose. Thank you.
David?
Doesn't look like David's on the call.
Okay. All right. Well, if that's a wrap, is there is there any objection to moving on to the next agenda item?
Charles, my apologies. I'm being called away. I'll check with y'all next week.
Thank you, Paul. Your input has been very precious here. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
All right. Item 2D, news items of national interest. Does anybody have any news items of national interest here? Hearing none. 2E, new cases on the docket for adjudication. I think we've already got, well, I've been talking about a case that we're focusing on more tightly, but that is number 2 of our listed cases. That's the election fraud conspiracy complaint of Michael. So we've already got it kind of before our court, but we'll be adding that as a more serious issue for future discussions here as a new case. Are there any other new cases anyone wants to bring before our court? Hearing none. List of cases, yeah. Has anybody been able to get any more signatures on any jury verdicts for any of the cases before our court? Hearing none. Is there any affirmations or denials of qualified elector status for anybody? From anyone?
Excuse me 1 second, Charles. Who's just joined us? Last 4 digits of the phone number that you're dialing in from are what? Okay. Greetings. Welcome, Dave.
Greetings.
I yield, Charles.
Okay. Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, Dave. Yes. Okay. So at this juncture, I'd like to build on our previous conference. We discussed enforcement. We talked about town constables and peace officers and how it's all related to biblical Torah law. We talked about how Exodus 18 is quoted by Mr. Blackstone as being the basis of the laws of England, which is our Anglo-American common law. And, in fact, we've got a web link near the top of agenda item 3 there to Mr. Blackstone's quote. in last week, we built on top of the Exodus 18 model of the entire superstructure to point out in the book of Numbers how the whole nation of Israel, all the able-bodied men of Israel who were able to go to war and who were over the age of 20, they were organized militarily for the nation of Israel. And here under that is such a profound proposition. It applies to the modern American concept of posse comitatus, that posse comitatus is local community organizing of able-bodied men to keep the peace in the counties, and it's a beautiful concept. And here under, many of you know that many of my younger years I spent as a Jehovah's Witness between ages about 4 to 24. I was pretty much raised as a Jehovah's Witness by my mother. And I learned a lot of good ideas there, I do believe. I think there's a lot of good points. But the leadership of the Jehovah's Witness organization I have come to recognize is quite corrupted. Where did... I don't have my document up. Yes. Copy. Dang. I thought I had that up. Anyway, I'd like to dang. Come on. Paste. Sorry for the difficulties here. Jehovah of Armies. This and maybe Lewis has brought it up there. My editing of this one document. Yeah, Lewis, it would be good if the web link there. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Lewis. And because this puts everything in a real nice perspective. Oh, geez, my formatting is a little bit goofy with my current one there, but this document is Jehovah's Witnesses are pretty serious Bible scholars. They frequently misinterpret the Bible, but they do know what it says pretty well. And the phrase Jehovah of Armies, this is the God of Israel. If you're a Christian or a Jew or even a Muslim, I think this should be a very significant argument being presented that the phrase Jehovah of Armies is found 285 times in the Bible. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah contain a majority of the occurrence, but in the New Testament, Paul and James use the equivalent, so it's both New Testament and Old Testament use of the phrase Jehovah of Armies. And this and you know, maybe this is of little significance to our secular humanist friends that don't hold the Bible in much respect, but for the people that are seeing linkages between our American traditions of the noble principles in the Constitution and biblical law, these should be persuasive arguments, maybe not finally persuasive, but at least strong evidence that this is how God wants people to organize, and the reason he does so is because he is enthused about organizing armies to fight the forces of evil of this universe. And the fact that this expression is found 285 times in the Bible, but the King James Version and other versions frequently dissipate that terminology. The King James Version calls it the Lord of Hosts. First of all, they take out the personal name. They just call it Lord. And second of all, host. Host could be all kinds of things. It can be a woman serving tea. She's a nice host. That's not what the original Hebrew meant here. It meant armies of men with weaponry capable of killing evil people. That's what an army is. That's what the original Hebrew signified. The King James and other versions, they're watering it down. It's part of the conspiracy to disempower our common people. So, and in the second paragraph there, that the Hebrew word tasva basically means a literal army of soldiers. That's how it's translated specifically in Genesis and Deuteronomy that it cites. And the Jehovah's Witnesses go on there to emphasize that it's also used in a figurative sense. To include angelic forces, heavenly bodies, angels. And so, continuing on, the next paragraph, the prince of the army of Jehovah, I have now come. And in Joshua's times, an angelic visitor came to him and to Joshua and identified himself as a prince of the army of Jehovah. I have now come. Cites the chapter there. And these angelic divisions are described as cherubs, seraphs, and angels and divisions of those, and organized groups. And Jesus was boasting that he had the power to call up 12 legions of angels at his call, if he wanted to, apparently in Matthew. And it continues on. I just really felt that this was a good article to point out the military importance in the mind of God to organizing all of his servants, angelic and human, in a military manner that is capable of going to war. Remember our quotes from the book of Numbers? It was talking about all the men able-bodied over the age of 20 that were able to go to war. This is a heartfelt and prioritized concern of the God of Israel, who frequently in biblical scripture prefers to refer to himself as Jehovah of armies. Military organizing is important. If you're a serious Christian, I do believe that, and that's the reason I quoted this. Let me conclude on the last paragraph. The expression Jehovah of armies thus conveys a sense of power, the power held by the sovereign ruler of the universe, who has at his command vast forces of spirit creatures, including physical humans, is how he wants it. It thus commands deep respect and awe, while at the same time being a source of comfort and encouragement for Jehovah's servants. David alone, and unaided by earthly military force, I don't know if that part's true. He had Israelite military behind him, but basically David alone challenged the formidable Philistine Goliath in the name of Jehovah of armies, the God of the battle lines of Israel, the battle lines of righteous, godly Israel. We've got battle lines here that we're facing. It's a spiritual war. I think the wordings are parallel to our current situation. Continuing on, not only in times of literal battle, but also in other trialsome situations or occasions of importance, God's people as a whole and as individuals could take courage. Courage is important. that probably a minority of modern patriots have any courage. They like to talk, but they don't have any courage to put their names on documents that are actually going to raise some eyebrows and cause some ruckus in the status quo and the powers that be. Anyway, not only in literal times of battle, but all trialsome situations, people can take courage and hope from recognizing the majesty of Jehovah's sovereign position reflects in his control over mighty forces serving from the heavenly courts. He administers force by due process of law in a court. This is transcendental concepts here. The use of the expression Jehovah of armies by the prophets supplied one more reason for those hearing the prophecies to be certain of their fulfillment, is how the Jehovah's Witnesses conclude this specific article. So, hereunder, thank you for tracking with me there, well, Lewis. I wanted to emphasize that our Exodus 18 model with the captains of tens and 50s and hundreds and thousands, the captains of tens are the town constable peace officers that have the authority to command a 10-man army, and deputy constables, basically, each of the qualified electors can be a deputy constable, a deputy peace officer, and under pure common law jurisdiction, when everything above the town constables is in harmony with this basic righteous godly set of principles, then that town constable can go anywhere and arrest anybody at any time that he has probable cause to form the belief that a crime has been committed, and everything else, the justice of the peace above him and the county judge, sheriff above them, and farther on up to the state and national levels, all of those are there to just affirm or hear complaints against the town constable proceeding in an unlawful manner. And if he has, he just needs to be chastised or something. But usually he hasn't, because most town constables in an ideal society would be quite competent of their limitations and where the specific natural lines are between keeping the peace and actually causing a breach of the peace, which most modern police officers routinely engage in, because it's in the nature of the municipal police power, whereas common law compliant peace officers would be competent to know that dividing line and not trespass over it. So anyway, I thought that was an important point to point out, that not only has this God of Israel mandated an entire superstructure of Exodus 18 and has commanded the people to organize militarily to responsibly self-govern in their own communities, but his title, properly interpreted, the God of the universe, at least according to the biblical view, is Jehovah of armies, and he is not properly filling the title that he complains or that he claims, unless he's got people on this earth trying to make his claim legitimate. We need to be part of Jehovah's army down here. That's what we need to be. That's what the Jehovah's Witness organization falsely claims to be. But we need to take it to practical applications and do it in a real world manner. So that's the important point that I wanted to emphasize by bringing out this citation, building on our series of enforcement and executive issues and peace officer issues here. At that point, I'm kind of concluded in my presentation here. Comments or questions on this issue? Anybody? Okay.
Charles, if I may.
Yeah, Cynthia?
Yes. You know, something that you said at some point, and what this last statement you were making. Each one of us lives in a different state. Each one of us is facing different political issues in our state. And I did not in any way want to minimize what Lewis may be going through in his state. I would really like to solidify that this call is to support one another, to be the iron that is sharpening the iron, that we may go into and feel like we have the brotherhood behind us, even if just in spirit, to go into our communities and tackle the issues that are destroying this country. And so if Lewis is suffering from racial issues in his community, then I want to support him in that. But I don't want to get wrapped up in things that aren't legitimate either. And not to start anything with that. We have to see things objectively and honestly. I don't know that my family was involved in any kind of slave owning or anything like that, or any kind of improper behavior towards the black community. If they had, I'm ashamed of that. But I don't know that they were, and I don't want to live with the burden that maybe they did or maybe they didn't, because I don't know. Because today, I don't see color. And I don't like it when other people that do accuse me and stereotype me because I'm Republican or because I voted for a certain person. We have 2 white candidates on the board, and so it's hard for me to see color in this. There was a black man that was president, and he was my president for 8 years. I didn't vote for him, not because he was black, but because I didn't agree with his political agenda. Because I am a conservative, because I don't believe in abortion, I don't believe in same-sex marriage, I don't believe in these things because the Bible tells me do not receive that. It will send you straight to hell. So that is what my focus is. What does my Savior tell me to think and believe? It's got nothing to do with color, because he came from Asia. The man who saved my soul came from Asia. So I just want to make sure that we on this call remain brothers and sisters in spirit and support each other and not knock each other down. And that goes both ways. I yield.
Thank you, Cynthia. Lewis, do you have any response for Cynthia there?
Well, I'd like to thank Cynthia for her statements. The one thing that I would like to suggest to Cynthia is that she refrains from using the statement, I don't see color. I know that people think that that's a very positive stance, but when you believe me, those people of color do not. It's offensive because you're saying that you don't see me. See, because if I'm standing in front of you and I am a black man, from one to say I don't see color, you're saying that you don't see me. I don't know if that's what you're intending to say, but
no, because justice is blind, and that's the kind of blindness I'm talking about. Justice is blind.
And
you don't
see,
get convicted because you're black, and you don't get off because you're black.
In the history of this country, you do get convicted because you're black. So that's where you and I
that's what we're trying to overcome. That is one issue, because I do agree with you. And so the way to overcome it is to stop being the victim, so that you're not being the victim.
We got to stop being a victim when we stop being attacked. See what I'm having a problem with right now is that what I'm seeing is, and this is not necessarily attacking anyone on this call. I'm talking about nationally, and I'm not the only one. That these lawsuits smack of racism because of the areas that they're targeting and why. So when you look at the why behind the why, listen, I look for those like you, Cindy, that are looking to squash that. You understand? So it's never a factor again. So I'm looking for people like you. But those that are using the same, these are the same dog whistles, these are the same arguments. In some instances, it's actually the same language from 130 years ago. It's the same playbook. Again, I make a lot of sports references. And this is a play. It's the same playbook. So when I see the same playbook playing out in front of my eyes, I'm going to call it out. And for those that maybe don't pay attention to the history from my perspective, because obviously they haven't been affected and their family has not been affected over the last 200 years in this country, from that end, I'm just trying to present that to get people to look at it a different way. And when you examine the why behind the why, with the majority of these lawsuits, it does smack of racism. And there have been judges that have said this, more than one. I've seen it. I was surprised when it was called out by some others. So I think that people like yourself and these other judges, we need to get together and then calling out these other instances, not allowing these dog whistles to be used, which we know are, they're dog whistles for racists, because it's not new. It's old, and we've seen it. So for people like myself, when we hear this type of stuff, especially from younger people, I'm like, really? The Daughters of the Confederacy, man, they were good. Because the seeds that they planted 150 years ago, man, they're still there. They're producing today. And if we could get that kind of message and get that into, as they did, the textbooks, you've got people that have a completely wrong perspective because of the Daughters of Confederacy. So they were very effective. I wish I could duplicate how they got that message out and got it to resonate throughout the education system for 130 years. So with that, I yield. I mean, I'm in agreement with you, Cindy, on the majority of what you've stated. Okay, and it's people like you that I am looking for, and those are the people that I call like-minded people. But those that continue to use the same language and talking points that's just been fed to them without any investigation and knowledge of history, that I have a problem with. That I yield.
Thank you, Louis. Cynthia or anybody else? If I might, I'm looking forward to prioritizing the general discussion that we're talking about here over and above what we've got listed with Michael on our list of court cases here, and trying to get into more specifics of if Paul Nally is going to be able to produce affidavits or others, so that it gets down to the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of whether or not probable cause to believe a crime has been committed actually exists. And see, at that point, it gets, when it takes on a tangible, physical, real-world focus in the discussion, then there's much less wiggle room for people to get offended or anything over ambiguous statements, because it's focusing on specific. Either you've got two witnesses in response to a specific accusation here, or you don't. That's real simple. If there's no two witnesses or one witness with other corroborating evidence, is how the statutory common law principle is generally articulated, then it's failure to state a complaint upon which relief can be granted. Just one cranky person with one affidavit about one issue and no corroborating evidence, no second witness. thank you for your testimony, but it appears that we don't have a second witness or any collaborating evidence, and thereunder, you have not met the threshold of probable cause to form the belief that a crime has been committed here. Please sit down and be quiet so we can go on to the next accusation before our court. That's how it's dealt with, mechanically, cold. Like Cindy was saying, justice is blind. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, or green. Either you're going to be able to state a complaint upon which relief can be granted, or you can't. And we're not here to indulge you if you just want to whine and holler about how terrible the world is. So anyway, I'm optimistic that we can get down to the nuts and bolts like that to actually see whether or not there's real substance. I'm rather inclined to believe that there is real substance behind these electoral criminal conspiracy frauds in the election process here, but I could be wrong. So we won't know until we start looking at the specific evidence. And the larger environment around us, it frustrates me constantly, and this is part of why I love working with Lewis, is because he insists on things like evidence. And the larger media, there's all this emotional stuff going on. Well, can you flash on the screen here real quick the affidavit in support of this testimony, where it's signed under penalty of perjury and before God and all that kind of stuff? I'd just like to see the affidavit there. No, they don't want to do that. They want to grab you by your emotional heartstrings and whip you up into a fervor, so you're a mob, totally indistinguishable from Antifa or right-wing mobs. And so the mechanics of due process of law, I do believe, can bring clarity and reason and logic to adjudicating these merits, so that with a blindfold on, no matter what race you are, if you can state a complaint upon which relief can be granted, and you got evidence so that you can back it up, then we proceed. We call in the accused criminal, and we say, look, we're prepared to issue a judgment here. You need to appear in our conference on such and so date and present counter evidence, or based upon the evidence before the court, our jury will decide the merits of this accusation against you, and they'll probably be inclined to convict you because you're not responding. So please show up and give us your counter evidence. That's the way I believe modern technology can be used to bring justice to these issues in quick and efficient manners, and in manners that are entirely fair and that are not slanted towards one race or another in any manner whatsoever. So I'm optimistic for all that. Good issue, Cynthia. Graceful response, Lewis. Are there other comments or questions in response to my words, or anything that Lewis or Cynthia said here? Hearing none. Looks like we're getting close to our 2-hour mark here, Lewis. Can I go ahead and squeeze in another agenda item here?
You got 2 minutes, or do you just want to go ahead and make your summarizing statement and then kind of conclude the business call? Because it's 6:58, and then you can just continue to move forward.
Maybe I should abandon at least abandon reviewing agenda item 4, at least on this side of the dividing line here. But at that point, before I make my concluding comment, I would like to give another opportunity to invite everybody in attendance here to, if you've got any comments regarding issues of our business meeting here, anybody have anything that they would like to say in our formal business meeting before we bring it to a close? Anybody? Hearing none. This is 2021, January the 2nd. This is the conference of the Supreme Court of Law for the USA, such as we be in our humble beginnings, and I am Charles Stewart of Coleman, Texas. This is the conclusion of the formal business meeting of our conference here, and we plan on continuing further discussion in open conference here, and we do hope everybody has a real great new year here. At that point, I yield. Comments, questions, anybody? Hearing none. I'd like to prime the pump by focusing a little bit more on the economic issues, agenda item 4. Is there any objection? We can go in any direction here. Anybody got any comments or questions? I saw Nikki make a comment earlier. Nikki, could I draw you out a little bit? You made a comment about the whole preamble to, I think it was during Paul's discussion, in the manner in which he was bringing forth his complaint to the grand jury. I think, Nikki, I saw some text entered into the chat window about something about the preamble to the Constitution already gave away the authority or something like that. Nikki, would you care to expand on what your thoughts were there? Are you muted? Nikki? Okay. Okay. I'd like to focus on the important issue of economics, which includes discussions of alternative currency and banking systems. I want to emphasize 4A in our agenda. The source of the economic credit should be the qualified electors at the grassroots level. I've been interacting quite a bit recently with the Beacon 37 group, Republic group, and they've got their own monetary committee, and a prominent scholar therein is John Root. He's got what he calls the common good economic system. It's an alternative currency and banking system. He's even got credit cards that can be used off of it, but it's still not very popular because, well, a number of points. But the alternative economic system that I've been inspired to embrace would authorize even people that are not willing to sign the qualified electors form, just people that need jobs and are paranoid about getting in organizations too deep. There could be exceptions granted so that anybody that needs a job and that seems basically an honorable person could be issued a line of credit, so that it's the social safety net concept, a minimal standard of living for everyone, but thereunder, the town constable at their local jurisdiction would be their banker, and he would decide how much credit each individual would have within his township jurisdiction. And the larger community, people manufacturing widgets out of New York, they would want to send some to Texas here, where I'm at, and those widgets would need a line of credit so that people in Texas could purchase those widgets. They could purchase them with the credit that the people in Texas would be assigned, but the credit has to flow from New York to Texas. And so the town constable here in Texas wouldn't be a large enough jurisdiction. It would have to go up to a national level through the hierarchy as we've generally described, and similar to Exodus 18. But those credits would be units of value that the township community and each of its members would consume. It would go from New York State through the other states to Texas, down to the counties, down to the precincts, down to the townships, and then under the township, if a particular constituent or potential constituent wanted to use all of their credits on the widgets out of New York, purchasing them, they could do that. But their town constable would be in charge of saying, sorry, you've reached your quota. You consumed 400 widgets there from New York, and there's nothing else to give you. I hope you can grow your own food, or you got alternative sources of income, because there's no other, when you spend all your money on widgets out of New York, then there's nothing left. And so the regulation, the throttling of the ability of people to abuse the system and consume more of the total goods and services of our nation than what is conscionable and fair, that would be regulated by the town constables at the first level. And this is similar to the judicial process, because at the next level, if one township is consuming more in total goods and services than another township, see, the individual townships should be in rough proportional balance to how much goods and services each township is consuming. And like at the individual level, there are people that are capable of producing way more goods and services for potential benefit of society as compared with other people. And to a much lesser extent, townships will probably be, some of the townships will be more capable of producing goods and services of value than other townships. Some townships might be centered around a gold mine, and they're producing lots of gold that's really valuable for everybody, and everybody recognizes that, and so that township is getting more credits because of the value of the total amount of goods and services that they are producing, as compared with flatland farmers that just are having a bad season and maybe they're not producing as much. So it's a balancing. The concept here comes into play of organic law and fairness. And when the decision-making process is decentralized along the Exodus 18 model hierarchy, so that the local leaders of each of the communities is doing what's fair, and it's all the decisions are open and public, then that brings the light of day and the sense of fairness into a real public and open type of forum, and people have opportunities to make objections if somebody is getting more than what is considered to be a fair share of the system. That would be that's a necessary ingredient, is to have open forums to talk about those things. That's what the town meeting would be all about, as well as the precinct level 100 court meeting would be talking about those things. And I'm working on documents to try to put that in more coherent and solid manner that can be reviewed by the other groups. But I do believe that these kind of ideas are going to move forward soon. We've got a number of propositions on the table with the peace officer constables, and we've got a number of really powerful tools in our toolbox that any one of them could get traction, including these economic issues. It could happen real quick, and we could be on a national recognized we could obtain national recognition in a very short time, in a very quick happening moment here, I do believe, from this economics issue or from the peace officers issue or probably 4 or 5 others. But anyway, I wanted to refocus again on those economic issues. I have been working on documents in the background, discussing them, and I was toying with the idea of not doing a conference next week, but the discussion with Paul and everybody was so good here. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do another one here. I did get caught up real nice by taking the 1 week break there. That didn't help me a lot. Anyway, I should yield here in case there's comments or questions about my economics issues or anything else. I yield. Anybody? Hearing none. Nikki, are you there yet? I don't hear you. Okay. Well, I do think we covered some important points. I do think I have an agenda item 5. Before that, I'd like to touch on 4C in the economics issue. Local municipal police officers and sheriff's deputies need to be economically motivated and incentivized to convert from municipal police power Roman Empire social engineering jurisdiction to common law peacekeeping jurisdiction. Yes, we can offer bonuses to local police officers and sheriff's deputies to embrace the conversion of the local city and county government from municipal jurisdiction to common law jurisdiction. You see, once these ideas start getting popular, it will cause profound social change. That's a bold one. Anybody care to comment on that? If not, I will go on to number 5, the Electoral College.
Before you go on, Charles, I would observe that thanks to the collectivist unionization of most law enforcement agencies, they have self-awarded themselves substantial compensation beyond what most common people are able to access. I'm not totally against a bounty or other award or compensation for special carrying out of their duties, but if they're going to be making exponentially more money by awards of special, this is exactly the situation that has created this conundrum and this dangerous situation that these agencies like CPS, DCFS, and others have lined their pockets while trafficking on humans under the guise of their so-called agency responsibilities. And this is something I have a tremendous problem with when we reward kidnapping and breaking up of families, something is wrong with the system that needs some dramatic fixing, in my studied opinion.
Excellent, Chris. I'm 100% with you there. The police officers and sheriff's deputies that we would be, that in my vision of how this incentive, reward, bounty for signing on to common law jurisdiction, that would be contingent upon them recognizing the difference between common law peacekeeping and municipal statutory code enforcement. And they would have to, the way I visualize it, there would come a threat. We would just be putting those on the table. Well, it could go different ways, but ideally, there needs to be individual counties and cities converting from municipal model of government to common law model of government. And as I described earlier, the economics of issuing our own credits, you see, when we are issuing our own credits based upon the goods and services that each of us can produce, then that is an alternative form of currency that's way different than Federal Reserve notes. And once we get away from the Federal Reserve note-controlled currency, and we've got our own currency based upon the goods and services that the people at the grassroots are capable of delivering, then our economic wealth will instantaneously double, probably closer to triple. At that point, we will have the resources available to give the police and sheriff's deputies the additional pay raises that we're talking about. And see, this is an issue. I'm glad you're talking about it, because we need to do everything in our power when we're talking about converting local cities and local counties from municipal to common law jurisdiction. That's where the battle is, in my view. And we need to do everything in our power within the boundaries of reason to ensure that there's no flare-ups of violence in the transition, and the people like the accountants and city attorney and the prosecuting attorney and things like that are the real parasites in the municipal form of local government, they're liable to be putting peer pressure on the local city police and the local sheriff's deputies, that we're all a bunch of hillbillies, and they need to, the local police officers and sheriff's deputies need to be on the team of the people that are the responsible governmental authorities here. They're pressuring those executive officers to continue with the evil empire form of government going on here. And we need to pull that peer pressure away from them, away from the corrupted local municipal authorities, and look them in the eye and tell them straight they're going to get a 10% raise and a $2,000 bonus the moment that this city or this county converts from municipal jurisdiction to common law jurisdiction. If they do nothing, if they just stand back and do nothing, that's what they will get. They will have a continuing job, only they will be peace officers instead of statutory code enforcement officers. I think we can do this. I think it's doable. It doesn't take very much to build the threshold number of populations, and if we can just get the local executive officers, when a corrupted judge or a corrupted mayor says, arrest that guy, drag him out, take him out of chambers, and the cop just stands here, does nothing, that's all we need, Chris. Our peace officers can go ahead and at that point remove the corrupted mayor from his position on the bench. And at that point, we're in control of the city. Because, Barton, go ahead.
I totally agree with you. This nebulous, undefined, all-encompassing, broadly vague and ambiguous municipal jurisdiction that doesn't exist on any map is a real beast that we have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, and the larger municipal problem that we're facing, true, it does not exist in any map because it permeates every map that's on the planet. So it's basically all municipal at this point. But there are. I'm focused here in Coleman County in the city of Coleman in Texas. It's kind of interesting because the county covers probably the city probably covers about 10% of the land of the county. It's right pretty much smack dab in the center of the city is smack dab in the center of the county, and that city, the boundary lines of the city are the nature of city jurisdictions is they are pure municipal, city municipal court. That's why they call the city police department police. The nature of the police power is a Roman Empire municipal power. It's top-down authoritarian. And so the city boundaries, you were talking about maps and geography and stuff there. I think the city boundaries are worthy of recognition, and those need to be dissolved. In the city of Coleman here and the county of Coleman, they've got 4 precincts as well as 4 precincts within the county. That's how the county is politically subdivided. And then the municipal jurisdiction of the city, it's got 4 city commissioner districts, is what they call them. And those 4 city commissioner districts are different. They don't harmonize with the precinct jurisdictions, even though inside the city there's both precinct boundary lines and city commissioner district boundary lines. The precinct boundary lines, I dare say, are presumed to be common law jurisdiction boundary lines, but those city boundary lines, those are pure municipal boundary lines, I do believe. So there's some interesting fine-tuning there. And that's what's going to have to be discussed as any of us start confronting local de factos. And I made a little speech earlier about, Charles Stewart needs to just quit talking about this stuff and start doing stuff so that others around can see whether or not Charles Stewart gets his butt thrown in jail, or maybe we're actually going to start doing some changes here in Coleman County, Texas, which would be inspiring to others to follow suit. That would be a real good thing. Anyway, I'm chattering too much. Chris, do you have any further on that?
Not at present. Thank you very, very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. It looks like we are kind of winding down. Our group is kind of become small. I think with the New Year's and everything here, people are probably entangled in other family type affairs here, so it's kind of understandable that we're just a small group here. And I'm kind of, I've got more energy in me, but I don't like to just be chattering just to be chattering. I've covered a lot of points here that I thought were important. I really like that Jehovah of Armies thing. I know, yeah, I think everybody that's left in the conference here professes Christianity, and the King James Version of the Bible calls it Lord of Hosts. Okay, that's real ambiguous terminology. If we're serious about our Christianity here, I think it's important to contemplate that we are in the service of a God who likes to organize armies. That's the message of Numbers. All the able-bodied men that are able to go to war. That's Torah law. That's a command. Okay? The book of Numbers is part of the first 5 books of the Bible. That's Torah law. And the God of all of Israel that we're all supposed to be in humble devotion and servitude to, his proper full title is Jehovah of Armies. He wants to have armies. He wants to have executive personnel that are willing to go out and risk their lives, put our lives on the line for the cause of righteous, godly justice on this earth. And I really thought it was important to draw that out from the title of the name of the God of Israel that we all profess to worship here. So I'm really happy with that little presentation, and the other issues. Yes, it all fits together well. But I'm kind of thinking maybe we should draw it to a close here. Does anybody else have anything that could, comments, questions, concluding comments, anything that might spark further discussion or a graceful closure of our conference here? Anybody?
If I may.
Yes, Dave?
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. I missed a couple of calls, and I got some emails about David Scheid. What's going on with David? Is he on the call, or?
He was on earlier, but he jumped off. If you have some,
That's some housing issues.
What kind of issues?
Housing.
Oh, yeah. Well, David's got a number of issues, and I guess in his personal life, his housing issue is really a serious point of concern for him. I don't know how he's going to navigate through that. We didn't take time out of the conference to talk about it very much, but he's seen this coming for a long time. I'm sure he's got some kind of a plan there that he's trying to follow.
Okay, and is Mike on the call? Did his issues get resolved? Well, I guess I should stick with David, because I know there were some issues about some agenda items. Did that stuff get covered, or?
We didn't talk much about David's agenda items.
Okay.
David Scheid jumped in and talked about the election fraud issues quite a bit, and then he talked about his own cases and difficulties with federal prosecutors and grand juries and judges and things like that, and that was pretty much the extent of David Scheid's contributions to our conference tonight here, Dave.
Okay. And what about Mike?
Cynthia is sharing a line kind of with Mike there, but Mike usually calls in on a separate line, and I don't see him connected. Maybe Cindy might be able to prompt him if there's something specific. Do you have something specific, Dave, that you wanted to ask Mike about?
No, I don't. I got an email. I thought it was about the call. I can't really recall exactly what it was, but if you guys didn't cover it, you'd know if you did, so it must not have been that.
Yeah. There's Mike. Well, he came in and Mike's with us. Why don't you, Dave, ask Mike how things are going there if you can again.
Mike? You there? Can you hear me?
Barely.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Well, Happy New Year. How you doing?
Hey, Happy New Year to you, too.
Thank you. So, I don't know, I thought you had an agenda item or something for one of the calls, and I just wondered if that was resolved.
Well, that was early on. The contest that we had going on a couple of weeks ago isn't resolved yet, but I really didn't want to pursue it yet at this time.
Okay.
It's basically an ongoing dispute about evidence regarding the election fraud, and there's one that is claiming they haven't seen the evidence. They don't believe there's any fraud, and
that's pretty funny.
Yeah, I find that very strange.
It is quite.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Yeah, it is quite strange. It's a general mass. What's the word I'm looking for? Trance. It's a mass trance. Everybody's under a trance, and for those that have eyes that can't see and ears that can't hear, it's just mind-boggling to just look at their agenda, that they've written, and how could anybody follow that and claim to be an American? It blows my mind. Okay, I yield. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Michael, if I might, glad that you're back here. Do you know where we might get affidavits? Is there a repository of affidavits or anything anywhere that anybody's assembling to try to move forward with the case outside of the de facto municipal jurisdictions?
Well, you don't mind me suggesting, just Chris. I know that L. Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell, both on their websites, have quite a bit. I believe in Michigan and Wisconsin and maybe Pennsylvania, they have some there also. There is a plenitude. There is, as Sidney Powell claims, a fire hose of evidence and information, a tsunami of it out there for those with eyes to see, ears to hear, and remembering, of course, that there are none so blind as those who refuse to see.
Yeah, we ought to be able to get sufficient evidence that even people that are inclined towards supporting Mr. Biden over Mr. Trump, if they're going to be honest, we should be able to use due process of law to bring them around and admit that probable cause exists to form the belief that a crime has been committed here. And the next step there is deciding whether or not we've got proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and that would be for the trial jury. But we need to be, and I'm not trying to pick on Lewis, but he constantly raises that point about where the evidence is. And if we've got repositories of affidavits, especially if we've got multiple affidavits about a single event, then we can bring due process of law to bear in manners in which Lewis will have no ground to stand on. It's kind of like a checkerboard or a chessboard taking the squares away, and all of a sudden he's only got one square to stand on, and then we're talking about removing that last square he's standing on. And I do believe Lewis is an honorable enough man that as we're moving forward with due process of law, I think he will go, okay, well, yeah, maybe there was some criminal activity there. And see, if we can convince a lefty like Lewis we can convince any lefty. You see? There's advantages to trying to work with people like Lewis and just indulging them and allowing the law, the process of the law, which is due to every American, to unfold in a calm and rational manner. We can win this, especially with people like Paul Nally. Paul is he's slow and steady, like a big old diesel D8 tractor or something, cat. He's kind of slow. He doesn't sing and dance real pretty, but he's steady and he's solid, and there's a lot of torque there coming through, and so I do believe we can. I'm inclined to believe strongly, 90%, that we can convince Lewis that, crimes have been committed. Lewis is not enthused about looking at the pro-Trump team on this. He just doesn't have the enthusiasm. But I do think that if we bring the complaint before the court here and we start presenting evidence, in fact, he's professed. If he sees the evidence presented in a clear and concise manner, he's basically pledged before us that, he'll convict. But he just hasn't had the evidence presented in such a clear and concise manner yet, and that's the duty of the presiding officer of this court, to create an environment in which the evidence can be presented to bring justice to our American people with regard to issues of current concern, such as this 2000 election campaign. I'm on board for pushing forward on this, but I need people like you guys to help me find the repositories. If y'all could maybe just send me some web links of where the evidence is located at, so that I can include some of those web links if there's repositories of affidavits or maybe short video clips under 5 minutes that are testimony, especially if the testimony is under oath, things like that, and longer video clips. If you can just specify a 5-minute block where the testimony's at on the count. We could do things like that, but videos that are 4 hours long, and having to wade through the whole thing, that's counterproductive. So anyway, if y'all might help me by sending me web links to where evidence is at, and at that point next week, we'll revisit this issue, and we'll be in a much stronger position to have a real healthy discussion with Mr. Lewis as the conference holds. Yes.
Yeah, I recently sent you some, I think it was a screenshot of a report regarding the city of Detroit suing BLM leaders for violence and criminal damaging. And one of the very first confrontations I had with Lewis is where I stated that BLM was causing and doing a lot of this damage. And he denied it, and he was in complete opposition to that viewpoint. And I sent you the evidence of that. The city of Detroit is suing BLM leaders for that very accusation. So I just see Mr. Lewis as someone that is very tainted with bitterness and unwilling to see and accept factual evidence, convicting those of his viewpoint of wrongdoing. And it's a very common problem. I see a stalemate here with him.
Well, it's really helpful, Brother Michael, if we focus on one issue at a time. And Lewis has agreed that it would be a good starting point if we're going to try to build community here, to focus on the 2020 election and the accusations of fraud therein. I think the BLM issue is a separate issue, and I think it's not healthy to
well, there's no doubt.
Huh? Pardon me?
There's no doubt it's a separate issue. But if he's not willing to accept that elementary fact that DLM leadership was committing the violence and inciting riots, then, we've got a problem here. I wouldn't even agree that he's suitable as an elector if he takes such a viewpoint. And now we have an entire city that is suing that group for the very act that he's in denial about.
Michael.
And if I may,
I'm
sorry, but I beg to differ that they are separate issues. You hear people all the time talking about if Biden is not elected, they will start burning down the city. That is a precursor of fear to not resist the seal of the election. I yield.
Well, if I might respond to that, I do believe whether or not the election issue is honorably resolved, the result of rioters burning down the city, I think for purposes of due process of law, we need to address the primary issue first about whether or not there's been election fraud. And that's an issue that can be addressed by itself without drawing in the issue that Black Lives Matter are talking about, burning down cities.
Yeah, that's fine. I yield.
Thank you, Michael.
If I may.
Dave?
Yeah, I wondered if you saw, Charles, the report from Antrim County up in northern Michigan near Traverse City. In one of the precincts, there are 6 registered voters, 3 of which voted. All 3 of them voted for Trump. Yet there were 662 ballots for Biden.
Do we have solid documentation that can be construed as evidence on that?
Well, it's been reported, so I don't have access to that data, or I would send it right over to you. But I'm sure you can find it. I know that it's legitimate because the certification of the vote has been overturned in Antrim County, and that's one of the reasons why. They did a forensic audit.
That,
if I may,
that sounds like
Charles.
Pardon me?
If I may, briefly, I put that report on the website, my website, countycongress.com. The entire report's there. It's downloadable.
Hard to hear you, Mike.
I'm sorry?
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, I don't know what's wrong. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you better.
Okay. I put that entire report up on my website, countycongress.com, and you can download it. I'm referring to Charles here or anyone else that would like to get it. So I don't know what more evidence someone would want, but this is coming from hundreds and hundreds of affidavits and sources. So I find it hard to believe that we're in denial about this. I find this very confusing. Why, from so many sources all across the country, these 6 or 7 states, the same thing is being accused in various states all across the country. We even have one trucker that delivered an entire truckload of 22 skids of ballots from New York to Pennsylvania, and they have yet to find the the trailer. So it's just, anyways, I yield.
Thank you, Michael. I lost connection there for 40 seconds or so. Sorry. But that issue with the truck too. Do we have any certified affidavits or anything of that nature?
Well, the legal teams on these cases do. You know, Lynn Wood. The gentleman's name is Lynn. His last name is Wood. As Chris was talking about earlier, Sidney Powell. They both have websites and they've got the evidence up there. But anyways, I think we probably should just wait and let it work its way through the system. And so far, though, you know, Lewis earlier tonight had cited, and he says this often, that out of the 50-some cases, none of them have been won. Well, none of the evidence has been submitted either. None of the evidence has been weighed by the court. It's been denied. So his point is moot. It's null and void, his point. I yield. Well,
I'm with you in critiquing Lewis for siding with the corrupted courts. The mere fact that the courts have not heard the issues is not an indicator that there's a lack of evidence. Lewis is quite aware that the courts are corrupted, and I think he's being inconsistent in acting like that's some type of evidence that lack of merit because the corrupted courts have failed to hear the merits. Yeah, but similarly as that, on your side, the fact that these lawyers have all kinds of documents and testimony that they're in control of, but apparently is not available to the public, and we're just supposed to take their word. Is that what we're looking at with these attorneys that are? What's going on there? Are you?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think the evidence is available. You must know where to look for it. And in regard to Lewis's claim, it's not that the courts are corrupt that nullifies his point. It's the fact that the evidence has not been seen or heard by the court. It's been denied.
That's because the courts are corrupt and they're denying the evidence.
Yeah, but he's trying to make it sound like, well, the courts at least heard the evidence, and that's totally wrong. They haven't heard the evidence. They've denied the evidence.
Because of their corruption.
If I may.
Cynthia.
Yeah, you show me a criminal who is going to leave as much evidence lying around as possible on the crime scene. That truck that delivered those ballots, pallets of ballots, okay? Not to be corny or anything, but there was pallets of ballots delivered from New York to Pennsylvania. He asked for his manifesto. They refused to give it to him. So that all they have is his affidavit. This man's life has been endangered. His family has been threatened. That's the thing that these people don't seem to understand. The evidence wasn't laying around. Criminals just don't do that. When they do leave it, that is the absolute defining reason for the forensic, because that's what the cops depend on. That's where the evidence lies, is in the forensic audit. Are you?
Okay, well, with regard to the truck and the pallets of ballots, I'm inclined to believe it's probably true. But if all we've got is one affidavit from one truck driver and we don't have any other corroborating evidence or any other witness testimony, then that is not probable cause to form the belief that a crime has been committed. See, we need at least a second witness. There's mechanical limitations that even the best court has to conform with in interacting with the real world. And when you just got one person jumping up and saying one thing...
It's not just one person.
Pardon me?
It is not just one person. They had a whole panel of affidavit witnesses testify in the state of Michigan, no less. It wasn't, maybe it was one trucker. Maybe it was one trucker that was willing to risk his life. But this is what we're dealing with. People.
What are we? I'm unclear still. Are you saying there's other people that saw the truck arrive with the fraudulent ballots on it, and they've also submitted affidavits?
I don't know.
That would be a real valuable point to try to clarify.
So let me ask you this, Charles. Would you put your life on the line if the courts are unwilling to even hear the one testimony? Who's now this guy who's testifying that his family, not just his life has been in danger, but his family's life has been endangered. Would you be willing to say, you know what, I saw the truck pull up, and I asked him for the manifest. He told me that they wouldn't give it to him in New York. I mean, would you be willing to do that and have your family's life put on the line?
I don't have any family.
Hearing some testimony, they would get more testimony received.
Well, if when the guy drove up to the loading dock with the ballots, if I was in charge of the loading dock, and the guy said something's wrong here, can you certify that I've delivered a truckload of ballots from New York here? If he allowed me to open the packages and inspect them, and I could do that, my answer would be yes. I would be willing to assume that risk, even if it risks my life. But we need a second.
And what if you were one of the players? What if you were one of the criminals?
I would never be one of the criminals. I would put a bullet in my head before I would be a criminal like that.
Right, but who's to say there wasn't a criminal put at the truck, at the receiving gate?
Well, there's well-settled rules of.
This is why the forensic audit is absolutely necessary. They were counting on all these loose ends and just the average Joe Schmo testifying. We need a forensic audit. Forensics is where crimes are solved.
I think courts can take judicial cognizance of things like forensic audits. That would be just one category of evidence. I think that would be documenting whether or not paperwork is in order. I think more important, though, than forensic audits is sworn testimony from individual people that is first-hand testimony, not hearsay, that is sworn to before God as being honorable, and these kind of things establishes. This is the necessary elements in deciding whether or not probable cause exists to form the belief that a crime has been committed. If we can't even get to that threshold because we don't have two witnesses or enough corroborating evidence to support probable cause that a crime has been committed, we just got mountains of people hollering and screaming about stuff. Well, mountains of people hollering and screaming about stuff is not sufficient. That's what the Democrats routinely do. They interact as a mob.
That's the point, though, Charles. They spent a whole day before a panel in the state of Michigan of sworn affidavits from people who were involved, from the truck driver to the people who were told to leave the room at the hour that the floodgates of Biden votes came in. There was all kinds of testimony, and they denied these people their just day in court. They denied them. They spent a whole day listening to testimony with Giuliani and Jenna Ellis. I mean, it wasn't just one person. There was a whole slew of people, and they denied them their day in court.
I haven't looked at the video. I probably should try to prioritize that, especially if we're going to get into it deeper. It does look like the issue isn't going to go away. Yes. Well, I'm going to need to talk to God about all this. I do believe Lewis is willing to admit if we can focus on the evidence. I believe Lewis would be willing to admit that there was criminal behavior in vote counting if we can present solid evidence. But it sounds like I'm going to have to spend more time reviewing the evidence. And if any of you can help me with sending me web links and things that are focusing on affidavits, and I'll try to look up on YouTube that 4-hour Michigan testimony on the vote fraud. I presume that's on YouTube, right?
Yeah, it's all on YouTube.
Okay.
And the forensics report from Antrim County is on my website, countycongress.com.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take a closer look at that, Michael. I love getting into the nuts and bolts like this. I am optimistic that we're going to be making some progress with Lewis. With or without him, we'll be making progress. Because Paul Nally's not going away either. And with people like Paul and Chris working with us, we've got momentum. We've got inertia. We can get to the bottom of this. So I am optimistic, no matter how it breaks. But if I'm thinking of bringing the conference to a close. Is there any other comments or questions from anybody here in attendance? I yield. Hearing none.
I do have a comment.
Dave.
Yeah, I did see reports. I heard reports that there were a number of trucks that delivered ballots from New York to Pennsylvania, and I do believe there are affidavits to follow that up with. I don't know where to find them, but I did hear an interview about it. And also, I heard an interview on Republic Broadcasting, National Intel Report to be exact, and if you go to republicbroadcasting.org, you will find that interview in their news feed. The gentleman that was being interviewed holds the most patents out of any one person in the entire world. He's a geek, and he invented the software that reads these ballots. And he talked about the mail-in ballots that have a fold in them, and what the computer does when it reads that fold. And there were thousands of mail-in ballots that did not have a fold or an envelope with them. And this guy says, it's purely criminal what they've done, and you got to find that interview. I know it's on Republic Broadcasting, and I wish I had the guy's name, but he is the largest. He says that he holds the most patents out of anybody in the whole world. He's a genius. Sorry about the background noise. I'll mute out now. I yield.
I believe I've seen that testimony. Basically, I haven't jumped into it in depth, but yeah, I'm aware of that kind of testimony. At that point, whoever's constructing the ballots would be the accused criminal, the Secretary of State, Elections Department, something like that, because they're obviously distributing ballots that are not authorized to be distributed to the people that are receiving them. So we need to be focusing at the same time on who we're going to accuse of having committed these crimes. It can't just be some ambiguous the state or something like that. It has to be specific natural people that are holding public offices. I'll try to get more into this and try to make some more argument that we can press with Lewis. I took a little bit of delight in Lewis's earlier words. He said there's no evidence. I caught him on that, if you'll notice, if I might put a little feather in my cap. I said, technically speaking, you may think it's incredible, but technically speaking, there are affidavits there, and there is evidence. Isn't that correct, Lewis? And remember, Lewis fessed up. He honorably said, well, yeah, you're correct, Charles. It is. There is evidence as a matter of technicality, even though I don't think it's credible evidence. Okay, thank you, Lewis. That's all we need. See, we reduced the squares on the chessboard for taking away their position for their fraudulent standing, one square at a time, baby steps. And all we need is to keep the pressure on. And I'm not accusing Lewis of fraudulent or anything like that, but the most honorable people can get entangled in their own agenda that they believe is righteous, and all of a sudden come to a realization that there's a portion of their party platform here where they haven't done their homework properly, and until we push them into that corner, they're not inclined to look at the ground they're standing on. But when we reduce it square by square down to just one quadrant there where they've only got a few squares, then all of a sudden they're highly motivated to start looking real closely at the grounds for the arguments that they're advancing to make sure that they are legitimate, they're honorable, they're righteous, they're supported by evidence in the real world. And I do believe Lewis is going to respond honorably to that, as with everybody in our conferences here. I believe we've got honorable people that do as best they can to respond honorably when issues are presented in a square and logical manner to them. And so I'm optimistic that our next conference is going to be at least as productive as this one, hopefully even more so. Comments or questions? I'm really going to shut her down now, unless somebody jumps up and grabs the microphone. Anybody? Hearing none.